First Contact Fiasco. The Galnaxian Empire had ruled the eastern spiral arm for 12 millennia. Their dominion stretched across 17,000 star systems, encompassing over 300 sentient species, all of whom had submitted to Galnaxian rule with appropriate awe and reverence. Commander Vrexel stood on the command deck of the Sovereign Luminance, her flagship that measured 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its gleaming silver hull adorned with the battle scars of 100 conquests. Status report, she demanded, her three primary eyes narrowing while the secondary set scanned the holographic displays surrounding her command podium. All systems at peak efficiency, Commander, replied First Officer Zex, his translucent exoskeleton pulsing with blue bioluminescence that indicated attentiveness. The fleet is in perfect formation. All 127 warships await your command. Vrexel's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Her fleet was the pride of the Galnaxian Armada, each vessel capable of reducing a small moon to rubble. Together, they represented the most formidable military force this sector of the galaxy had ever witnessed. And the target world. Third planet from an unremarkable yellow star, as you specified, Zex reported. The inhabitants call it Earth. They've achieved primitive spaceflight, but have barely ventured beyond their own satellite. Our long-range scans show they've recently developed rudimentary fusion power and have established a handful of orbital habitats. Vrexel made a dismissive gesture with her upper limbs. Barely worth our attention, but intelligence reports they've begun experimenting with dimensional physics. The Empress wishes to welcome them before they stumble upon something truly dangerous. The bridge crew understood the implied meaning. The Empire welcomed emerging civilizations by subjugating them, stripping their worlds of resources, and conscripting their populations into service. It was a process perfected over thousands of years. Efficient, ruthless, and absolutely effective. Prepare the grand approach formation, Vrexel ordered. Let us show these primitives the futility of resistance. The Galnaxian fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect synchrony, their massive ships arranged in the sacred pattern of their ancestral gods, a spectacle specifically designed to overwhelm primitive species. As they approached Earth, the vessels shifted their external hulls to capture and amplify solar radiation, creating a display of light and color that had driven less evolved species to their knees in religious terror. The ships moved into a hemispheric formation that partially eclipsed the sun from North America, casting kilometer-wide shadows across cities from Los Angeles to New York. Smaller vessels descended to hover 1 kilometer above major population centers: Washington, Moscow, Beijing, London, New Delhi, their weapons systems prominently displayed but inactive. On Earth, emergency sessions convened at the United Nations, in parliaments, congresses, and presidiums. Military forces worldwide went to high alert, but no aggressive action was taken against the vastly superior alien force. When communications opened, Commander Vrexel appeared on screens across the planet. Her chitinous face, with its multiple eyes and complex mouthparts, was framed by a headdress denoting 12,000 years of imperial authority. She wore ceremonial battle armor fashioned from the crystallized remains of previous civilizations that had resisted Galnaxian rule. People of Earth, her voice boomed through the universal translator. I am Grand Commander Vrexel of the sovereign Galnaxian Empire. For 12,000 years, we have brought order and progress to the galaxy. Your world now falls under our protection. Surrender your governments to imperial control, and you shall be treated with appropriate mercy. Resist, and face annihilation beyond your comprehension. She paused, awaiting the predictable response. Terror, followed by desperate acquiescence. Such announcements had never failed to produce immediate capitulation. Instead, there was a pause. Then on the main communication screen, a middle-aged woman in a simple gray suit appeared. She was the Secretary General of the United Nations, according to Galnaxian intelligence. She cleared her throat and then did something unprecedented in Vrexel's 3-century career. She smiled. Greetings, Commander Vrexel. Welcome to Earth. While your light show was certainly impressive, we would appreciate if you could reposition your vessels. You're blocking our satellite signals, and there's a major soccer tournament final about to start that billions of people want to watch." Commander Vrexel's mandibles clicked rapidly in confusion. "Perhaps the translation matrix has failed," she said to Zex, before addressing the human again. "You misunderstand. This is not a request. This is your new reality. The Galactic Empire now claims authority over your world." The Secretary General nodded patiently. "We understand your position, Commander. However, before we discuss any such arrangements, perhaps you'd care to send a delegation down. We could meet at the UN headquarters in New York. It's a bit short notice, but I'm sure we can arrange some refreshments." Vrexel stared at the screen. In 12 millennia of expansion, no species had ever invited Galactic conquerors for refreshments. "This is not a social call," Vrexel insisted, her voice hardening. "This is an imperial annexation." "Yes, you mentioned that," the Secretary General replied, still smiling. "But surely diplomacy begins with dialogue. We have much to learn from each other. For instance, those phase shift engines on your support vessels. Fascinating approach, though our engineers have been wondering about the efficiency of your matter-antimatter containment system. It seems rather elaborate." Vrexel froze. How could this primitive possibly know about their propulsion systems, let alone have opinions on their design? 2 days later, Commander Vrexel found herself in the bizarre position of sitting in a room called the United Nations Security Council chamber, accompanied by 5 senior officers. They wore their most intimidating formal armor, adorned with trophies from conquered worlds, and pulsing with energy fields that could vaporize projectiles. The humans around them wore varied clothing. Some formal suits, others in what appeared to be casual attire. One delegate from a northern country wore what intelligence identified as a sweater with an image of a small furry animal on it. "Would anyone like coffee? Tea?" asked a human attendant. Science Officer Krull whispered to Vrexel, "Their offering of beverages must be a ritual of submission." A young human woman with short hair and glasses overheard and laughed. "It's just hospitality," she said, "though I wouldn't recommend the coffee from the basement cafeteria." "I am not here for beverages," Vrexel announced loudly. "I am here to discuss the terms of your world's incorporation into the Galactic Empire." "Certainly," said the Secretary General. "But first, I believe the delegate from Kenya has a question about your energy distribution systems." An older human stood up. "Thank you, Madam Secretary General. Commander, our scientists have been analyzing your ship's power signatures, and we're curious about your reliance on quantum field manipulation for energy distribution. We abandoned that approach years ago after discovering the instabilities in the probability matrix." Science Officer Krull's bioluminescence flashed bright orange, a sign of shock. "That's impossible. Quantum field manipulation is the pinnacle of energy technology. The Empire has used it for 7,000 years. The Kenyan delegate shrugged. "Perhaps that's the problem. You've been using the same approach for so long that you stopped looking for alternatives. Our quantum foam suspension system is far more stable and delivers approximately 40% greater energy efficiency." The room fell silent as the Galactic delegation processed this. Their empire had conquered worlds specifically to obtain the resources for their quantum field manipulators, and these humans had simply found a better way. "This is irrelevant," Vrexel finally said. "We are here to discuss the terms of your surrender, not exchange technological theories." "Of course," the Secretary General nodded reasonably. "But while we're on the subject of technology, perhaps you'd like to see some of our facilities. Nothing impressive by your standards, naturally, but we're rather proud of them." Before Vrexel could refuse, she found herself agreeing to a tour scheduled for the following day. Somehow, these humans had steered the conversation away from their submission and toward a cultural exchange. It was unprecedented and deeply unsettling. That evening, in their temporary quarters at a building called the Plaza Hotel, the Galactic officers reviewed the day's events. "They show no fear," noted security chief Mox, her claws nervously tapping against her armored thorax. Every species we've encountered has responded with appropriate terror to our arrival. And their technology. Science Officer Krall's voice trailed off. They speak of our advanced systems as if they're examining outdated museum pieces. Vrexel paced the room, her claws leaving slight impressions in the carpet. Something is wrong. A species this young cannot possess technology that rivals ours. They must be bluffing. What if they're not? Asked First Officer Zex quietly. The question hung in the air like a toxic gas cloud. The next day, the Galnaxian delegation arrived at a facility called NASA Ames Research Center. They had expected primitive technology, the equivalent of what the Empire had developed 9 or 10,000 years earlier. What they found shattered their assumptions. This is our smaller quantum computation lab, explained Dr. Eliza Chen, a human scientist who moved with casual confidence that irritated Vrexel. We use it primarily for educational purposes now. The room contained equipment that seemed cobbled together from mismatched parts, some sections gleaming and new, others visibly patched and repaired. Science Officer Krall scoffed. This processing unit couldn't handle the computational needs of a Galnaxian food replicator. Dr. Chen smiled. Oh, this is just the housing. The actual quantum processing happens in the probability wave function that exists in the substrate dimension beneath ours. The physical components are merely interface points. Krall's bioluminescence flickered in confusion. That's theoretical technology. The Empire's best scientists have only begun exploring computational access to substrate dimensions. We needed more processing power for climate modeling about 15 years ago, Dr. Chen said with a shrug. Conventional approaches weren't scaling fast enough, so a team in Bangalore tried something unconventional. It worked pretty well. As the tour continued, the Galnaxians' sense of superiority crumbled further. The humans showed them propulsion systems that didn't rely on conventional physics, energy generation methods that the Empire had never conceived, and most disturbingly, defensive technologies that could potentially neutralize Galnaxian weapons. None of it made sense. The humans had been splitting atoms for less than a century. They had only left their atmosphere for the first time about 70 years ago, and yet, in some areas, they had leapfrogged technologies that had taken the Empire millennia to develop. How? Vrexel finally demanded, facing Dr. Chen in a laboratory filled with equipment she didn't fully understand. How has your species advanced so quickly? Dr. Chen considered the question. I think we're just really impatient, she said finally. And we don't like being told something is impossible. As the Galnaxian delegation returned to their ships that evening, Commander Vrexel faced an uncomfortable realization. For the first time in her career, she was considering whether an imperial annexation might not be in the Empire's best interests. The tables turn. Commander Vrexel paced the command deck of the Sovereign Luminance, her claws clicking against the polished obsidian floor. 3 days of interaction with humans had left her both frustrated and deeply unsettled. Her reports to the Imperial Council had been met with disbelief and demands for a demonstration of power. The humans must understand the consequences of defiance, she announced to her officers. Prepare the Stellar Forge. The next day, representatives from Earth's governments gathered in a large auditorium at the Kennedy Space Center. On massive screens, they could see Mars, the 4th planet in their solar system. The Galnaxians had chosen this uninhabited world for their display of power. Observe carefully, Vrexel told the assembled humans. What you are about to witness is the Empire's Stellar Forge weapon. After this demonstration, we expect a more appropriate response to our offer of protection. On screen, 7 Galnaxian warships moved into position around Mars. They began to glow with intense golden energy that connected between them, forming a 7-pointed star. At Vrexel's command, a blinding beam shot from the center of this formation. Mars trembled. Then, a massive trench began to form on its surface, carving a perfectly straight line from pole to pole. The crack widened, deepened, until it was visible from Earth's telescopes. A gash nearly 5,000 kilometers long and hundreds of kilometers deep. The Galactian officers turned to observe the humans' reaction. This demonstration had made entire civilizations surrender immediately in the past. But the humans weren't cowering. They were watching with interest, some taking notes, others discussing technical aspects of what they were seeing. "That's quite impressive," said the NASA administrator finally. "Very precise work." Vrexel's mandibles clicked in agitation. "We just carved a planetary-scale trench into your neighboring world." "Yes, we saw that," nodded the administrator. "Remarkable energy coherence over that distance." "This weapon could do the same to Earth," Vrexel insisted. An older scientist raised his hand. "Question: how do you maintain beam stability through the gravitational fluctuations near a planetary body?" "We've had trouble with that in our larger terraforming projects." Before Vrexel could respond, the Secretary General stood up. "Commander, we appreciate this demonstration of your capabilities, but perhaps you'd be interested in seeing one of our projects as well." Without waiting for a response, she nodded to a young woman who spoke quietly into a communicator. On the screen, a small human ship appeared near Mars, approaching the massive trench. It was tiny compared to the Galactian vessels, appearing as little more than a bright dot at first. "What is this?" demanded Vrexel. "Just watch," said the Secretary General with a calm smile. The human ship positioned itself above the trench. A soft blue-green glow emanated from it, expanding outward in pulsating waves. Impossibly, the edges of the Martian trench began to move. Rock and soil flowed like liquid, the massive wound in the planet slowly closing as if it had never existed. In 10 minutes, Mars was whole again. The room fell silent. The Galactian officers stared at the screen in shock. "That's impossible," whispered Science Officer Krull. "No species has mastered matter reconstruction on that scale." The Secretary General's smile widened slightly. "We call it our experimental matter manipulation technology. Still in testing, but it seems to work rather well." What she didn't mention was that the technology had only been successfully tested in laboratory conditions the previous month, and the engineers had worked through the night hoping it would function on a planetary scale. The humans had been bluffing, but Commander Vrexel didn't need to know that. After the Mars incident, the Imperial Council was deeply concerned. They dispatched their foremost cultural researchers to Earth to understand why humans remained so unimpressed by Galactian power. Lead anthropologist Nexel established a temporary research center at Oxford University, where her team had been collecting human media, art, and literature for the past week. "It makes no sense," she told her research partner Vox as they reviewed their findings. "Their civilization is barely 10,000 years old. They've only had electricity for about 2 centuries. Yet they act as if our 12,000-year empire is quaint." Vox projected images from human entertainment, science fiction films, television shows, and book covers depicting massive space empires, planet-destroying weapons, and cosmic threats far beyond anything the Galactians had achieved. "They'd been imagining empires more powerful than ours for generations," said Vox. "Look at this Star Trek from over 70 years ago. Their fictional technologies exceed our actual capabilities in many areas." Nexel frowned. "So when we showed them our greatest weapons, to them, it was less impressive than what they see in their weekend entertainment." Vox finished. A human research assistant entered with more data drives. "I've brought the creative writing samples you requested," she said, setting them down. Thousands of stories about humans defeating alien invaders, befriending advanced species, or becoming the dominant force in fictional galaxies. Nexel's primary eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought. They've been mentally preparing for this encounter for generations. Meanwhile, on the Sovereign Luminance, Commander Vrexel faced a growing crisis. Reports from various research teams all reached the same disturbing conclusion. Humans were advancing technologically at an exponential rate. Their chaotic approach to research, trying unconventional methods, ignoring established principles, embracing failure as a learning opportunity, had allowed them to develop solutions that the regimented imperial science academies had never considered. More concerning was their adaptability. In just days, human scientists had begun incorporating observations of Galnaxian technology into their own research. They weren't copying, they were improving. As Vrexel contemplated these reports, an urgent communication arrived from deeper in the solar system. "Commander," reported the captain of an Imperial scout ship, "we've detected a Class 9 anomaly near the gas giant they call Jupiter. It appears to be a dimensional rift, and it's expanding rapidly." Vrexel's blood ran cold. A Class 9 anomaly was a tear in the fabric of reality, potentially catastrophic for the entire solar system. How did this happen? "Unknown, Commander. But our readings suggest it formed recently, perhaps within the last solar cycle." Vrexel immediately ordered her fleet to the anomaly. This was no longer about conquering Earth. This was about preventing a disaster that could destroy multiple worlds, including the Galnaxian ships. When the human governments were informed, they immediately offered assistance. Despite Vrexel's objections, a joint task force was established, with both human and Galnaxian scientists working to understand and neutralize the anomaly. The dimensional rift continued to grow, now visible as a swirling vortex of purple-black energy larger than Jupiter's Great Red Spot. Energy readings were off the charts, and gravitational distortions were beginning to affect spacecraft navigation. "Our dimensionally sealed vessels can approach within 10,000 kilometers," Vrexel informed the human team. "Any closer, and even Imperial technology cannot protect them." Dr. Elena Kuznetsov, a quantum physicist from Russia, studied the Galnaxian data. "The problem is that you're trying to resist the dimensional frequencies," she said. "What if we synchronize with them instead?" Science Officer Krall's bioluminescence flashed with alarm. Synchronizing with a dimensional rift would tear a ship apart. Dr. Kuznetsov shrugged. "Not if we phase shift the hull resonance to match the harmonic oscillation of the rift boundary." That's never been attempted," stammered Krall. "We've had some success with a similar approach when studying quantum singularities," said Dr. Kuznetsov. "It's worth trying." After heated debate, a compromise was reached. A joint team would approach the rift in a modified human vessel, using a combination of Galnaxian defensive technology and human phase-shifting techniques. As the makeshift crew prepared for what might be a suicide mission, Commander Vrexel made an unprecedented decision. She would personally join the human scientists. "The Empire must be represented," she told her stunned officers, "and I must see these humans in action with my own eyes." The approach to the dimensional rift was harrowing. The small vessel shuddered as gravitational waves battered its hull. Inside, human and Galnaxian crew worked side by side, making continuous adjustments to their experimental systems. "Phase shift the resonance by another 0.3%, called out Dr. Kuznetsov, her fingers flying over her console. Science Officer Krall implemented the change, his bioluminescence pulsing with stress. "Energy fluctuations are increasing. We should retreat." "Hold position," countered Dr. Kuznetsov. "We're almost synchronized." Commander Vrexel watched the humans work. Where Galnaxian officers would follow established protocols, the humans improvised. Where Imperial scientists would proceed with caution, these humans leaped forward with bold hypotheses. It was chaotic, unnerving, and undeniably effective. As they reached the boundary of the rift, sensors revealed its true nature. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was artificial, created by technology far beyond even Galnaxian understanding. "It's a probe," realized Dr. James Chen, analyzing the data patterns. "Some kind of automated dimensional explorer, but it's malfunctioning. Its return protocol has failed, so it's caught in a loop, trying to create a pathway home." "Can we communicate with it?" asked Vrexel. "I think so," Dr. Chen nodded. "But not with conventional signals. We need to speak its language, dimensional mathematics." What followed was the most unusual first contact in human or Galnaxian history. Using the ship's modified systems, the team established a mathematical dialogue with the alien probe. It took hours of trial and error, but eventually, they convinced it to close its dimensional gateway and enter a dormant state that could be safely studied. As their ship returned to Earth, Commander Vrexel sat in uncharacteristic silence. She had witnessed something that challenged 12 millennia of imperial philosophy. These humans, with their chaotic methods and irreverent approach to established knowledge, had solved a crisis that might have baffled the Empire's finest minds. 1 week later, Commander Vrexel stood before the Imperial Council, transmitted via quantum entanglement from her flagship in Earth orbit. "It is my recommendation," she said formally, "that the Galactic Empire establish diplomatic relations with Earth as an equal partner, not as a subject world." The Council erupted in outrage, but Vrexel continued. "These humans represent something our Empire has not encountered in 12,000 years, a genuinely new perspective on the universe. Their technological development is unorthodox but remarkably effective. More importantly, their cultural adaptability and creative problem-solving offer approaches the Empire has never considered." She paused, then delivered the statement that would change Galactic history forever. "I believe we have more to learn from them than they from us." In the months that followed, the first formal treaty between Earth and the Galactic Empire was signed. Human scientists began working with Imperial researchers, while Galactic cultural experts studied human creativity and innovation. As for Commander Vrexel, she requested a permanent posting as the Empire's first ambassador to Earth. In her private quarters, she kept a small item given to her by Dr. Kuznetsov, a coffee mug with a phrase that had come to represent her new understanding of the universe. The most dangerous words in any language. That's impossible. 5 years later, when a far more ancient and truly threatening empire emerged from the galactic core, they found something unexpected. A united front of humans and Galactians, whose combined approach to technology and strategy represented something the cosmos had never seen before. The old empire expected easy conquest. They were in for a surprise.